Greetings and welcome, viewers. Before starting today's program, my mom will be initiating the fifth episode of Sci Talks with an important quote. Over to you, Mom.
Sairam, brother Vamsee. It's so glad to hear from you after a long time. And welcome to Sai Talks. And today's quote is like today is April 20th. So it is spirituality is an activity. It is an activity of the divine within. That is a quote for today, and it suits you. From like, say, I heard that you wrote a book. It's more like Guru within. So I don't know, Swami appropriately gave this quote. That too, it's on April 20th. So it's all Swami's grace. I think it's truly divine plan. We have been connecting with you, and we got some like quality time with you, Brother Vamsee. I'm so happy that you have created some time for us. So glad to hear from you. And now over to you, Sai Karthik.
Thank you,
Thank
Mom.
you. Thank you, Sai Ram.
Sairam, thank you so much, Mom, for the wonderful quote. And thank you all for joining us on the fifth episode of Sci Talks. Today we have with us Dr. Vamsee Juluri. So I'll be giving a brief introduction of him before diving deep into the interview. Dr. Vamsee Krishna Juluri is a professor of media studies at the University of San Francisco. He's authored various books such as Becoming a Global Audience, Bollywood Nation, The Mythologist, Rearming Hinduism, The Kishkinda Chronicles, which is a fictional series inspired by Lord Hanuman, and The Guru Within, which is in progress. His articles have been published in numerous scholarly and popular publications, including the European Journal of Cultural Studies, Television and News Media, Communication Theory, The American Mind, the Huffington Post, the San Jose Mercury News, the San Francisco Chronicles, the Hindu, Swaraja, India Currents, India Facts, the Dharma Dispatch, First Post, News 18, Daily O, Foreign Affairs, the India Express, the Print, and the American Kahani, which are all like major news publications throughout the globe. So, with that, I would like to thank you, Dr. Juluri, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sai, and thank you, and Saira.
So, So with that, we'll be getting on to the first question of today, and of course, it'll be a journey throughout life. So we'll be starting from your childhood. So can you share some memorable experiences from your childhood that shaped who you are today, and any particular people or events that inspired you in those early years?
Absolutely. I might as well dive into my childhood with an explanation of my background, which I kind of scrambled to find because, Zoom was changing all the basic backgrounds. I thought I would put the Golden Gate Bridge because I'm coming to you from the San Francisco Bay Area. I couldn't find it. And before I turned on a filter which turned my face into, a goblin or a donkey or something, I found this nice picture. Um, which I wanted to share because this sort of takes you into what I wanted to tell you about my childhood. This is a picture of a very special and beautiful Punya Kshetram in Andhra Pradesh, in the Kurnool district area, called Yaganti Uma Maheshwara Swami Temple. So the Gopuram you see is from Yaganti. I took this picture myself a few years ago when I had the uh, privilege of visiting. And those rocks you see, which look really like two Abhaya Hastams. So it's almost like Shiva and Parvati. And we believe or we know Swami, we consider Swami an avatar of Shiva and Shakti together. So it's like Abhaya Hastam of both Shiva and Parvati together. So this amazing rock face. Um, is in the Kurnool district, and there's a Shiva temple. There's an enormous Nandi. A lot of cultural significance here. There's a lot of small caves in these rock formations. One of which is supposed to have been where Brahmam Garu, a very famous saint and seer in the Telugu-speaking regions, is said to have meditated. More recently, if it's looking familiar, viewers, and you're not sure where you saw it, if you watch the movie Pushpa 2, uh,
Mhm.
they filmed a little bit, in this beautiful place. And of course, like almost any part of India today, it is facing, absolute short-sightedness and greed, with a lot of mining and blasting going around. Even when I visited about a decade ago, there's so many rock formations which are just being turned into powder and dust and rubble. But the Nandi is there, and I'm sure he's displeased with the way humans and human greed at the moment is disrespecting nature. So I wanted to start with that as the most compelling lesson I have from my childhood, because I happen to grow up in an amazing landscape which does not exist anymore, full of rocks, amazing rock formations, and sky that used to be really blue. And this was very simply the heart of what, what is now the heart of Hyderabad, an
Yeah.
area known as Banjara Hills. So my parents built a house in road number 12, Banjara Hills, in 1973, and that was my childhood, the 1970s and 80s, in this amazing pristine landscape called Banjara Hills and then Jubilee Hills. There were a few houses, there was economic growth, there was what we call development, but those days, for the most part, nature still had the upper hand, in the sense that people didn't destroy everything and build up every inch of square space, and far less cars, far less traffic, far less pollution, so the skies were clear. So 80s and even till the 90s, it felt like economic growth and nature could all coexist. But from the time India opened up its economy in the 90s, and we've been pushing for this globalization and hardcore capitalist growth, they've failed to find a balance. And I'm sure it's the case in many other parts of the world too. But in my hometown in Hyderabad, it's like God's landscape, which was built over billions of years of natural history. And, there used to be mongooses in my house, by the way, in my parents' old house.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, which no longer exists, of course. But there used to be mongooses, and there used to be, hawks and eagles. And, I mean, it was a different world altogether. So this has been the most compelling lesson I think of, even though I teach and write about media and culture and pop culture, and I talk to college students. I'm very interested in connecting with youth and with children, and also with parents, and in facilitating intergenerational conversations. This is uh, the story of heartbreak that I carry within me, in the sense that for thousands of years, you see the world progressing at a certain kind of pace. And then suddenly, in just about 10 or 20 years, you see nature obliterated. And then, first you see the lithosphere gone, the rocks are gone, the trees are gone. You might have heard that in University of Hyderabad last week, there was a
Yes. That was
con-
all over the news.
yeah, and so all these things are happening. Air is not fit to breathe in so many cities today. The rivers are full of sewage and industrial effluents, and the Himalayas are getting endangered because they're trying to promote mass tourism in areas where really there should be no mass tourism. So a lot of debates about economics, ecology, what was the purpose of society, what is the purpose of education. So I wanted to start with by invoking the way the natural world looked when I was a child, in the 70s and 80s.
Wow, that was probably the most unique, introduction to a Sci Talks episode I've ever gone. It was all started with kind of like how it was back, growing up. It was very much man and nature were very well connected. Wow, especially I still remember as a kid, even growing up in Kansas, nature and man they actually got along pretty well. Really, the pollution and the destruction of nature, I feel honestly, it's become even more prevalent in the last 10, 15 years. So it's really a global issue at this point. It's not only going on in India, unfortunately, it's going on all across the globe, and it's really sad to see that. And and I hope the world that people come to their senses and they work more in preserving nature and figuring out ways that they're still able to grow economically without harming nature.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and yeah, it's not like Kansas or California are immune from it. I mean, in the Bay Area now, it's like we have three seasons in a month or even a week at sometimes. I mean, it was always a little quirky in San Francisco weather-wise, but I think even in the last few years, I can see the weather's very unpredictable.
That's
So
true.
yeah, it's crazy stuff.
It's very true. And then moving into the next question, which is in regards to your educational journey. So, what was your college experience like in India and then transitioning to the US for your PhD? Were there any professors or mentors during this period that guided you to where you are today?
Indeed, yeah, I think I have a lot of debts I would like to acknowledge with reverence today. So I'll give a quick backstory of my education in India for your viewers. Before I came to the US for my graduate education. So I studied most of my schooling was in Hyderabad in HPS, and I was there like 70s and 80s. I did study in Madras for a couple of years because my mother was still working in Madras. The Telugu film industry was based in Madras till as late as the 70s. Uh, so my father and mother built a house in Hyderabad, but my mother also had a home in Madras. That's where her work was. So I used to go to school in Madras, and I think around first grade or something, they shifted me to Hyderabad. And I can actually invoke the first of one of the mentors I want to mention. My cousins, my uncle, aunt, cousins, they all used to live next door. So my father and his cousin built homes side by side way back in the early 70s. So my cousin, Dr. Sanjay Baru, uh, who later became a very well-known economist, and later he was Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's media advisor. So Dr. Baru would be one of my big mentors, particularly in the 80s when I was in high school. And I think he and his wife, Mayodina Rama Baru, both of them encouraged me to write and pursue my dreams and all those things. So while I was in school, as I mentioned, I think I really liked writing. And of course, those days, Hyderabad, was nature was the biggest muse you could have. Um, but the reality, economic reality, was that your parents were worried about your future. They wanted you to do engineering, right? Like so, I was trying to uh, get good at math and science. Taking brilliant tutorials and Agrawal classes, all those things they used to have back then to try and get into IIT. I was a okay student till about 10th grade or so, and of course, I enjoyed extracurriculars a little more, perhaps, like quizzing and writing. 11th and 12th, my grades went completely down. And it was an interesting time, and in fact, that's the theme I kind of wrote about in the Guru Within, which someday, with Swami's Anugraham, I hope I'll manage to complete and publish. So it was a memoir of my high school and college days, which was also around the time my family met Swami, and I think we can come back to that later. So I tried to get into engineering. Of course, I wasn't very good at it. But anyway, I did go to Bangalore. I tried studying engineering for a couple of years, and then I dropped out. And this was 1989. And after that, I was really wondering what to do, and my parents were worried. I was worried because I was a teenager, so I pretended not to show anyone that I was worried. I just walked around saying it's the revolution, and or it's like the rebellion, and whatever. But really, I was worried too what my life would become. And then, as it turned out, I managed to get a BA, and then I got into journalism school in Delhi. And after I did a diploma in journalism, I kind of started getting a little more clear about what I liked, and I realized it's not like you had to become a full-time journalist either. You could actually become a scholar or a student or a researcher of media. And early 90s was a very fascinating time as far as media studies or mass comm was concerned, because India was going through this huge satellite TV revolution, so the media economy was booming, and uh, people were making music videos, TV shows, all this stuff. And there were also people, I think, who wanted to write about it. And I said, hey, this is very interesting. I like to write. And here is a topic I seem to be very fascinated by, which is writing about the media and the impact it's having on all of us. So, with that goal in mind, I came to the US in 1992, and I came for my master's. I studied in Ohio in a very small town for a couple of years there, and that was also a bit of a culture shock in the sense that I should probably share that because I think one of the things that's very important for people who've come here, students who've just come to the US from India to know, or if you're in India and you're planning to come, um, between the kind of confidence you may rightly have in your academic work, your professional future, and the fact that a lot of your friends have come to the US and have made it, um, you know, it's very easy to take it for granted that it's no big deal, coming from, say, uh, Hyderabad to the US is, it's like going from Vijayawada to Hyderabad, or
Yeah.
or from, yeah, it's, or from Kannur to Hyderabad, whatever. It's like these days everything is interconnected. You can you get, I mean, once you sort out your paperwork and your visas, you can stay in touch. Everybody's familiar with everything. But then this is a complex society. This is such a complicated culture, and today it's going through a civil war. I
That's
don't think it is uh, reality addling civil war that America is in, and we are very much as Indians in the middle of it, in very very complex ways, which we don't, I think, fully understand. So maybe we can come back to uh, what advice for students a little later, a little more. But anyway, so in 1992, when I came here, we didn't have the internet, but we were somewhat familiar with American society, American popular culture. And so the point I'm trying to make is that I felt like I knew everything about America and I was just going to fit right in and do very well. And I had a tough time the first couple of semesters or so, in the sense that because I don't know, some professors, some topics seemed very interesting. I remember taking a class seminar on the history of propaganda, and the stuff I read and we discussed in that class, 30 years later, it's still relevant. In fact, I'm trying to write more about it now. But there were a lot of things I was not really prepared for, like because my whole life I'd just been a student in India. And here in grad school in Ohio, my classmates were like, some of them were like older Americans, like who had been in journalism for 20, 30 years, and then, of course, there were scholars from Africa, from Latin America. So it was and I think, unlike perhaps STEM or engineering or math or science subjects, in humanities and social sciences, your story tends to become a part of the classroom. And just knowing what to share, how to analyze yourself, how to find the balance between being humble and learning from them, and at the same time not getting what today we call gaslit, you know, by
yes.
their cultural assumptions or stereotypes that they may have about you. So all of these dilemmas were things I think I faced the first year or two. Definitely had some wonderful teachers. Dr. Srinivas Melkote who's a pioneer in the field of development communication. He really used to take wonderful care of his students, especially all the international students, and that was in Ohio. And later, I went to do my PhD in UMass Amherst, and UMass. Now, you might say it was like the Berkeley of the East, or for fun, I used to tell friends in India, UMass is like the JNU of America. You know, uh, so it was a very vibrant campus. Of course, it was very cold. It was New England, but anyway, I think after Ohio, I was used to the cold.
Okay.
Um, But New England was much more vibrant, and I remember joining the campus the day apartheid ended, you know, in South Africa. So people were partying and celebrating. So they were very meaningful 4 or 5 years. I had some wonderful professors there too, like Justin Lewis, who wrote some of the best books on American politics and how media shapes our understanding or misunderstandings about society. Sajjali, who started this documentary production house where he would make educational videos on how media are impacting society. In fact, if, if any of your viewers really want to know how media is influencing us, whether it's teen girls or violence and crime, the Media Education Foundation videos are really good. Professor Radha Krishnan, was a great philosopher and scholar of post-colonial theory. So there were some wonderful people there, and then um, after that, I did my PhD there. I taught in New Hampshire for a couple of years, and then 2001, I landed up in San Francisco. And since the question was about education and mentors and learning, um, I should actually also say a little bit about how my approach to understanding media evolved in that time. Um, when I first landed in the US, I mean, I knew I wanted to research media and talk about it. Um, but again, I think I landed in the US with this assumption that I kind of knew it all. Uh, and, it took a while for me to realize there is a whole history of research, of scholarship, of debate on the media, and in the West, which I wasn't aware of. And I know even in India, there has been thousands of years of scholarship, mostly in Sanskritam, but also, I guess, in Telugu, Tamil, other languages. Like the Natya Shastra and so much work on communication and philosophy and art and culture. And I think if you're a student, it's always good to know that hey, we didn't just get born into a vacuum. It's not
Exactly.
like the world started with us waking up and suddenly saying, "Oh my God, the world was really messed up and full of oppression, and now it's all up to me to, get onto Facebook and fix the problem with the world." Uh, I I mean, yeah, I mean, Amherst was a big activist kind of place, and I loved it. But I also was challenged by the fact that you had to learn about the world, if you want to change it. And I think where I've kind of slightly differed from many of my colleagues in academia, who think that fixing the world is an entirely materialist, external, political problem, um, as opposed to say somebody who's come from a Sai background of parents who were devotees of Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba, and trying to stay rooted or learn more about thousands of years of the cultural legacy, from the time prehistoric people were sitting in those caves and contemplating the nature of reality and the self and Atma in those caves in Yaganti. Oh, by the way, sorry for a small aside, but I should mention that the uh, the reason I ended up going to these caves in Yagantinia is that it's right next to a village called Jwalapuram. And if you Google Jwalapuram, you will discover it is a very important location in the field of prehistoric archaeology.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. My father used to tell me about it. Then, after my father passed away a few years later, I ended up meeting the archaeologist who's done groundbreaking work there. His name is Dr. Ravi Korisettar. And Dr. Kori Settar was visiting, I mean, he was there in the trenches. I went to meet him with some friends. Um, Now, very briefly, the reason everyone interested in history should know the name Jwalapuram is we're all taught in our textbooks that Indian history kind of begins in 5000 BC or so with
Yeah,
uh, the Indus Valley, right?
exactly.
Fine. But some people will say it goes back a little more, say 20,000 or 30,000 BC with, the cave paintings in Bhimbetka, you know.
Of course. Yeah.
But there is something that was happening here right from 70,000 BC.
Oh, really? Wow. So
Yeah.
it's even more backwards.
Exactly, exactly. So 70,000 BC, there was a world-altering environmental event, which was the explosion of a volcano in Indonesia called the Toba volcano. And when that exploded, most of South Asia was covered in this ash cloud. leading to months or I think even years of toxic rain, climate change, and there was mass extinction. So scientists believe that you know everyone died out, whoever was living there. But Dr. Corey in his work found proof of life, proof of continuity of culture before and after the explosion. So he hypothesizes, I'm sure with good evidence, that the
Hmm.
people, early Homo sapiens or whoever they were, who were living in these caves in this region, had access to spring water, you know,
Oh,
which was not polluted. That's how they survived in these caves. And so just think about it. That spring is still there to this day.
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So prehistoric times, you had so-called cavemen or so-called primitive people. Uh, our ancestors, really, they were not primitive. I mean, I think they were doing yagnams, since time immemorial, and they were worshipping water. They were worshipping nature and the Panchabhutas. And then,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, then later you have the rishis, you have the deities, different traditions converging. And the most latest iteration, on the one hand, you have Pushpa making it famous. Uh, and on the other hand, you have the real estate and mining people. I don't know how much of it they will leave for the next generation. Anyway, sorry, I was still talking about education and mentors. Uh, yeah, so from UMass, I came to the Bay Area. So my research was interested in the quest. I think it was in a field called critical cultural studies, which came out of England. And we were interested in studying media's influence and how audiences interpret the media, but with a lot of emphasis on political issues. So my first book, Becoming a Global Audience, which was my PhD thesis, was based on interviews of young audiences of MTV in India in the 90s. And that was sort of what I was interested in. But then when I came to San Francisco in 2001, again, it was coincidence or fate, who knows? They gave me a class to teach called Media Stereotyping and Violence.
Oh,
And now it was, I think, unpopular class. None of the old faculty really wanted to teach it. I was a new guy. They said, you teach it. I'm so happy to be in San Francisco. I say, I'll teach anything, even calculus. I mean, well, obviously, I didn't say that, but okay. I'm teaching this class on media violence, which is a topic I'm nominally, informed about, but not an expert as such. But a couple of weeks after I started teaching this class, this is September 2001, right? The 9/11 attacks happened.
oh, yeah.
And, I know a lot of people think that, 2020 or 2016 were the years everything in the world changed. But, 9/11 was pretty frightening. And, the country was in a state of war. So I ended up teaching this class for 4 or 5 years. Every semester I would offer it. A lot of students would take it, not just media, but management, science. Everyone was taking this class. And I started reading Gandhian philosophy at that time. So, in a sense, after critical cultural studies, I think which was somewhat more Marxist in orientation, uh, talking about violence and terrorism and war um, took me into Gandhian thought, which, in places like San Francisco, there were still people, believed in. So that also was an influence. And then I would say post. Um, I think the more I started writing about media and war and media and all these issues, by about 2008, when the next big terrorist attack happened, which was a 2008 26/11 Mumbai attacks, I think just realized that there was still a lot more I had to learn and write about. Which is kind of how um, you know uh, I've been moving into writing about Hinduism and this book called Rearming Hinduism, and writing about the need to fight misrepresentation of Hinduism and India. And I realized I've kind of eased into your next question about professional interests as well. But anyway, I'll just pause for a second there.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. I mean, like, exactly like you said, it's a great point to, move on to the next question, which will be a continuation of what you're speaking about. So, like, what motivated you to pursue academia, and then what were some key milestones that were there to reach to where you are today professionally? Which you've kind of already started with, the first course you taught at the University of San Francisco, but I guess you can kind of continue, kind of like post that, and kind of to the key milestones to where you are today.
Yeah, so I think yeah. So first milestone probably was dropping out of engineering, then eventually getting into I don't know whether to call it a milestone. That was more like a self-inflicted highway robbery. You know, when you're your parents think you're doing well in college, and then suddenly one day you come home and say I can't do this, I quit. Well, yeah, luckily each of these was a hard-earned milestone by God's grace and parents' patience, most importantly.
That's true.
And 2001, so I had Marx, I had Gandhi, and I had my pen versus the propaganda of machine and terrorism and capitalism destroying nature, all these things. That's kind of how I saw myself. Um, I think between 2008 to 15, one of the things uh, that I started to notice was this systematic silencing of all points of view in the news coverage of India, and essentially the dehumanization of lives getting lost, like, for example, the terrorist attacks in Mumbai and so on. And I was talking about, I wrote some pieces about the press coverage, and then the Huffington Post picked it up, and then I had a column there for several years. Um, and unfortunately, I think 2017 or something, HuffPost, it was such a vibrant and diverse forum for many, many points of view. They just shut the whole forum down. I think post 2016, the US has really, the public sphere has shrunk. So
That's true.
yeah, I mean, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. Like I think the U.S. has lost its way in so many ways, and I mean, some of it has to do with this new technology. Talking about a milestone, and that is the coming of smartphones. And right
That's true.
at around 2010, 2012, whenever the smartphones started getting pervasive, and we started noticing, I think, some of the changes in college students by about 2017, 18. And then I think one of the most, for 2, 3 years, I was really wondering what is going on, with people not looking up from their screens, or not even talking to each other. I would find, especially in the smaller classes, lower level classes. This was 2016, 2017, 18, I think, for 2, 3 years. And then COVID, of course, was even more challenging for everyone involved, students, families, etc. The impact of smartphones and social media, and of course, the broader political polarization going on in the US. I think all of these had a huge impact on everybody. And so, in a sense, I think my interest now is, well, I'm kind of plodding along towards the next milestone, which is really to write a book. Uh, so I have to tell you this. So from 2003, when I wrote and published my first book, Becoming a Global Audience, till 2014, I was very happy teaching and writing books, and of course, writing columns once in a while. I had a book out every 2, 3 years. 2014, my book Bollywood Nation was featured in the Jaipur Literature Festival.
Oh,
Um, yeah, which was, for any writer, that is like a milestone. I was on a panel with the great actor Irfan Khan, a very, very wonderful actor.
he's truly a global actor, right? So
Yeah, yeah, and he was very nice, and he was very, very humble, and so it was like a uh, wonderful experience being with all these great writers and very accomplished cultural stars. And around that time, I think 2, 3 things started to happen where I felt paradigms were shifting or at least inadequate. On the one hand, I should mention one of the things that also really um, bothered me. I think on the one hand, there was this increasing terrorism and lying about the victims of terrorism in the discourse all around the world, especially in the West. And more personally, I was also very, very heartbroken by the unprofessionalism and mendacity
mm,
of way our gurus, uh, you know, uh, passing from his mortal form or whatever, which happened
yeah,
on day 2011. Uh,
yeah. It's
I mean,
actually coming up in a few days. Mahasamadhi Day.
Indeed. So that too was, I mean, first of all, because it was shocking, we had this sense of comfort or familiarity that Swami, always, I mean, thousands of stories, which to outsiders or people who are not familiar may seem like exaggerations and things like that. But having gone through most of your life with this certainty, I won't even say faith, but with the certainty or the experience or awareness that, like your mother's what put it, that the divine within was also there, like in front of us in the form of a elder or a mother-like figure, guru-like figure. uh, he was there. And then, and you have complete strangers, in the newspaper, people who have never been there, or people who went there with just without an iota of humility and curiosity to observe what's
Exactly.
going on, just writing whatever drivel they wanted, like hallucinating about gold Rolls Royces or all the wealth he had. I mean, he was such a simple guy, I mean, I said, look, he was so frail, his body was frail, you know what did he ever take with himself? I mean, look, he brought water to millions of people, education, healthcare, and the indirect impact, the inspiration to do seva, and to pursue a life of both spirituality and social service, across generations, across cultures. It was so huge. So that's when I started writing the Guru Within, because I wanted to write, and I poured my heart out, in the sense that, look, I didn't want to write it in the form of a traditional Sai bhakti book, where audio.
Yeah.
So I wrote it for a
To
new
reach
audience.
like the global audience, right? Like whether they're a devotee or not a devotee, it's to get like a complete 100% picture of. It's kind of like a 360-degree angle sort of thing.
Exactly, exactly. So I just wanted to say, look, here are four human beings, my mother, father, and Baba in one generation, and me in the next generation. And I compared like how each person's life was at each point, kind of a generational memoir, and then how our lives intersected. So it was a very rational approach, and it sort of ends with, Baba's influence on me in terms of rebuilding my life after dropping out and coming into this field. Yeah, so I don't know. That book almost got published, but then for various reasons in 2014, I decided to postpone it. So now it's just floating around. I don't know. I feel Baba will guide it to getting published in some form. But what has happened more broadly, I think, is from about 2014 till now, I wrote this book called Rearming Hinduism, which was, I think, in a way, the pain and angst that was already going into Guru Within got channeled into Rearming Hinduism. And that book also came out with this sense of despair about the world following this blind, monstrous path of destruction through economic growth and a materialist worldview. Um, and the problem that the media was lying about all the wealth of wisdom that we still had, in Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism, which, you know, academia and the media was simply, gaslighting. All these things came out. So the first part of rearming Hinduism is kind of a critique of how, all the other formerly colonized cultures and traditions were given a voice in academia, but we weren't as Hindus. And then the second part of the book is more optimistic. It's just sort of a bhakti infused take on what, the Mahabharata and Ramayana and Dharma and the Shavtar, all of these mean to me. So
Yes.
that book did very well. It was a, kind of, I guess, a bestseller. And, so it got me traveling and meeting a lot of people, but after 2, 3 years, I think I just realized, it's a very strange time in India where politically people feel like, yeah, there's a Hindu revival going on and this and that. Of course, critics say Hindu fascism is here. And so I don't know. I mean, it's very, politics is a very messy game. And I just, in a way, I think I realized after a while that my duty is perhaps to stay more within the field of observation, study, learning, and teaching. So I'm trying to write 2 or 3 books at the same time. Now it's messed up because each book takes me halfway. So I'm trying to. I was started writing a book about the history of Hindu phobia,
Mhm.
and um, you know, and then that kind of paused and I started writing a book on the history of propaganda, which is sort of a big issue in media studies. And now I'm also interested in generational change, particularly because there's some amazing scholars like Jonathan Haidt and Jean Twenge, who've been doing research on the impact of smartphones and very simply, a generation going through childhood or teenage now, like say 2010s, 2020s, is
Yes.
not the same thing that a generation going through childhood is say in the 1920s experienced, because of just the nature of the communication technology involved. So these are the kind of themes, propaganda, generational themes. I'm trying to still put it all together and write. So I don't know yet uh, what the next milestone will be. Uh, I have to resort to a cliche and just say I have to probably just focus on the path and the journey rather than the destination for now.
Gotcha. That makes sense. But, I feel like, your path is actually really clear. It's definitely, working on getting, your books published, and then it'll create a great influence for the readers and viewers, in various lines of life. So, yeah, I look forward to, seeing, all those three books and including the, the Guru Within. I hope to,
Oh, yeah, that's the
one
big
day.
one. Yeah, there's something mystical. I don't know. Maybe Baba wants me to um, go work on it as Guru within, but then convey to everyone that it is about the divine within.
That's
As you know.
true. And yeah, that's true. And then, moving on to, the next question. So the next couple of questions will actually be in regards to kind of some observations I felt in, especially when it comes to Indian culture and then the religious point of view, whether that's in India or the US, kind of like what the current situations are. So, moving on to this next question. So today, India cinema, media, and the social media reels, they're often promoting negativity, which is leading people of all ages down the wrong path. Many are unwilling to engage with positive content or spiritual teachings from the Holy Scriptures. What do you think is driving this trend, and how can individuals stay on the right path?
Yeah. So what I think the one practical takeaway I can give is that we all need more education in media. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, people call it media literacy, but the last 10 or 15 years, unfortunately, even this whole project called media literacy has been hijacked because I was looking at what people are teaching in many, uh, initiatives which have millions of dollars, and then they talk about media literacy and disinformation and fake news. And again, that has been politicized so much. It's almost like, they just want you to, I mean, at best, it's like they want to train you to say, okay, hey, this is an article um, from some shady blog. It may not be true, whereas this is from New York Times or NPR or BBC, so it must be true. Okay. Step one is okay, fine. You should always look at the URL. Don't get fooled by scamsters. All these things. I mean, that is a good practical skill. But why should you stop questioning BBC or New York Times or NPR when you can see with your own eyes, how one-sided they have become or they have been, and how brazenly, you can see these big media giants aligning with these global geopolitical, geo-economic, ideological, imperialist agendas. I
That's
mean,
true.
you can see it. I mean, if there is, for example, let's say a terrorist attack in Kashmir, the way it happened on Valentine's Day a few years ago in the town called Pulwama, when this militant blew up a bus with 40 or 45, Indian soldiers. And the guy records a video saying, I hate these guys. They're kafirs. They're, cow piss drinkers. There's a clear ideological hate.
Yeah.
And, as a reporter, I think the media has a duty to mention that as it is. You don't have to feed into stereotypes or generalize all members of a community as terrorists. You should not do that, but at least state a fact. Instead of doing that, they do the opposite thing. They very quietly make it seem like all the members of, they make it seem like there was no religious hatred involved. that this was an act of resistance to oppression by the majority barbaric Hindus of India and the world. So you see, media is very much implicated in shaping genocides, slow extinctions. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying this off the top of my head. I'm saying this again after having read a lot about the history of propaganda and how disinformation campaigns and psyops have been used, to dehumanize whole groups of people over the last 100 years or so. So how to connect that with what you asked about, negative content and things like that. People should be aware that a lot of things you see on your phone or your screens are not happening organically. There is a centralized impetus, influence, investment being given to what you and I are watching. So, I mean, now the thing about social media is, of course, there's millions of people putting out content. There's also a lot of, I think, very talented, creative people who are putting out nice content about spirituality. Like sometimes, when I click on something with about astrology, I keep seeing a lot of stuff, and some of it is really good. Like, now I'm much more alert to nature. Like, okay, so it's going to be the full moon in 2 or 3 days, or hey, that shiny dot today is cloudy, of course, but that shiny star is actually Guru. It's Jupiter, and I can see behind that as Orion, or whatever. So you're getting good stuff as well once in a while. But then, as far as this negative stuff goes, it's not innocent. I mean, we are being bombarded because these algorithms, uh, and intelligence agencies, who knows who all are involved with this. But everyone's attention, everyone's mind has just become the battlefield. Earlier, I think like World War I, battles took place in these trenches in Europe. Right now, it's like every single person's, you know, panchendriyas, our senses, and our mind, our buddhi, all of these are like the muddied
Yeah,
battlefield of World War I France.
that's true.
And you just have people with the money and wealth and the you know perverted vision to subvert our attention and consciousness and mind, playing with us. So anyway, so what can we do? One, be aware that the moment you pick up your phone, uh, you're picking, it is, as they say, you're not this is picking you up. What is picking you up is billions of dollars of very well planned investment into turning you into an addict, first of all, to keep swiping and scrolling. And people are getting drawn into it in so many ways. As Haidt's very important book, The Anxious Generation, tells us, teens are getting got hit very hard. Particularly the last 10, 15 years, mental health and concerns are on the rise. Teen girls are impacted by unrealistic beauty standards and bullying and all sorts of nasty stuff going on. Uh, Teen boys also getting alienated, going into these video games. Older people getting completely politically polarized, fighting with each other in family WhatsApp groups. Uh,
Exactly.
like, I mean, so many effects, all of these, because people, we're not able to step back and say, hey, this is a trap, they're playing for us. So we have to really evolve both in terms of our knowledge about media and also spiritually, start treating it more and more like a pack of cigarettes or a Coca-Cola. It's like an addiction, I
That's
think
true.
the other day I was just thinking, in the 70s and 80s, they say, the dark intelligence agencies put crack cocaine into certain communities to destroy them. I think today the real problem is not just drugs, but also phones. Uh,
Yeah,
so, oh my God, I don't know how we got started on this, but oh yeah, negative content.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah, I think we should be more aware and um, yeah, actually, two examples I want to share with, because these are kind of on my mind. And uh, one is specifically in terms of negative content targeted at our gods, our gurus, our traditions, our collective memory, and our identity. I don't know if you've been following it, but from about December, there's been an explosion in anti-Indian and specifically anti-Hindu hate. online.
Yes.
Uh, and So it's interesting, some people will say, oh, yeah, but it was to be expected. It's the American right wing. And, and that is true. A lot of it is coming from the American right wing. But where did they get these assumptions and tropes from? It was from the so called liberals, the so called anti racist celebrities. One specific example I want to mention: a couple of weeks ago, Saturday Night Live, which used to be very good a long time back.
Yeah.
Uh, Saturday Night Live had a opening scene with Lady Gaga, who
Hmm.
I understand is. Have you seen? Did you see that one? Uh,
I didn't watch that one, but yeah, I mean, if you could give some context, then
Sure. Yeah. So Lady Gaga was a very pop iconic pop star
yeah.
celebrity, an icon, very progressive. Comes in this little skit, which suddenly goes from friends celebrating a birthday to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, okay.
And they show this idol of Kali looking very, very wicked and scary, and this guy coming in like Mula Ram and doing human sacrifice, and these people are shouting Om Namah Shive and things like that. So it is bizarre. And the hypocrisy is this: 1 week before that, they had Tom Hanks on the same show, kind of playing the role of this so-called MAGA right-wing xenophobe racist. And you see, that is a hypocrisy, right, of this celebrity, so-called anti-racist, so-called progressive celebrity class. That 1 week they're so self-righteous and show they are the good guys, and it's only and the MAGA guys are racist. And the next week they're peddling the oldest anti-Sanatan Dharma, anti-indigenous, anti-pagan, and anti-woman tropes.
Yeah.
Millions of people. And I want to remind your viewers today that this happened in 2017, around this time, also in your city, right? Oh my God. The-
Oh, yes, in Kansas City, like like that, there were those two people that were shot by this, like they were shot at a restaurant just because
Srinivas-
of the color of their skin. Srinivas Kochibutla.
yeah, a Telugu guy like you and me.
Exactly.
So when in so 2017 January, uh, again, a lot of people were upset with the elections and all that stuff. And there was frictions, there was uncertainty, there was tensions, and one of the first fatalities happened in Kansas City, and this young, computer engineer from Hyderabad, uh, is shot. He and his friend are shot while at a bar in Kansas City. And what I found very interesting is that a few days afterwards, all these celebrities, Hollywood celebrities at the Oscars were wearing badges and condemning, Donald Trump and racism and all that. They did not mention Srinivas's name.
Mhm.
Now, they were talking about anti-Arab racism, they were talking about Islamophobia and all these things, but they were very, very, you know, very, very rigid and not even acknowledging that Hindu phobia also exists. Now, in this case, yes, he was mistaken for an Iranian, to be generic xenophobia, Islamo, Arab phobia, whatever, fine. But the fact that all these kinds of bigotry and hatred are interrelated, and what could affect one person can affect another, they're refusing to budge. The so-called liberal academia and the celebrities of Hollywood. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention, comparable to the Saturday Night Live throwing fuel on the fire right now with that crazy episode, was this guy called Raza Aslan, who was writing professor, I think, and also a famous author. Interestingly, I happened to meet him on the bus at the Jaipur Lit Fest. He's a nice guy, very pleasant. He became very famous writing about, Islamophobia and all these things after 9/11. So Raza Aslan does this show for CNN where he goes to Kashi, and it is such a puerile, Oriental. I mean, it was so dumb. The premise of his show is he's like this, Western explorer who's going to save Indians from the caste system. Then the way he's going to do it is by checking out these outcasts called the Aghoris, the cannibals. And you
Yes.
just there and, and it's full of lies. For example, they translate Kashi, the city of light, the Varanasi city of light, as the city of death. And they say this is where Hindus go to dump their dead. So look at the, right. I mean, so these are all the people. This is CNN. I remember talking about it with my students. And they're all saying, no, 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 but CNN audiences, they won't hurt you, they're not racist. So I said, well, here's news for you. I don't know if I can use an explicit or word on a.
Oh, you can just be natural. It's fine.
Okay, I'll say bleep you. I mean, I had to say bleep you to CNN and this entire monstrous machine of lies which has taken over the so-called good guys, in the
Yeah.
last 10 or 20 years. And and that's why I think we are in a very, very precarious but also a promising position as Hindus, as Indians, as Sai devotees. And of course, when I say as Hindus and Indians, I also mean I think there's a lot of promise for non-Indian Hindus, from the diaspora. I think I see it in a very simple rational sociological framework now. When you use words like religion or tradition or civilization, it still gets a bit tribalistic. So I think the world order today, um, and I wrote about it in this article called Clash of Civilizations and Generational Change. It's in the American Mind. Um, the world order today is basically getting polarized, really cleaved into groups of people with long cultural memories on one
Yes.
side, and people who have shorter memories or whose memories have been artificially shortened through revolutions and purges and propaganda, uh, and who therefore hate the past, right? So, and geopolitically, look at it. You see Hindus with memories going back to 70,000 years or 10,000 years or whatever, and you see a lot of some of the Judeo-Christian people also trying to revive whether it's Catholics or some of the Jews, and and on the other hand, you have people who really think that until the day they were born, the world was oppressed, and you just have to kill all old people.
Yeah.
Uh, to have a utopia. So, I mean, I'm exaggerating. I mean, I'm simplifying these arguments and so on. But I think the real challenge is, to understand what is happening in the world today. And, sorry, I mean, I just jumped with negative content on the phone to Clash of Civilizations. So it's really, I think, a clash of, ancestral memories. That is what is going on. But then it's up to all of us to, especially when we talk to our elders and talk to our children, to become bridges of intergenerational communication, to become memory bridges, so that people don't learn about their past and their future only from these, compromised technologies.
That's very well said. I'm glad, this is actually a good segue into the next question, which is in regards to so given the current religious landscape in India, there are
Mhm.
growing concerns about forced conversions to other religions. However, one thing which I observed is do you feel like there's a greater threat to today's generation is actually more than the forced conversion? It's actually the shift towards non-religion or atheism, and the decline of spiritual values influenced by the media and popular culture.
I think, I mean, the best way to approach or try to answer this, in the spirit of Swami's love all, serve
Hmm.
all, help ever, hurt never.
Yeah.
We to just say that I think the real crisis is with the war on truth. Forced untruth is the problem.
Yeah.
So what is happening, I think, is that because of the fact that people, for thousands of generations, you had a sense of truth really by the fact that you lived in nature. Your calendars were according to the moon, sunrise, sunset. The way you lived was determined by the way the plants around you, you know, gave you
Yeah.
the harvest. And of course, you had your deities, your cultural practices and all these things. So sure, probably there were times of oppression, unrest, revolution. All these things have happened, fine, and people have been dealing with it. I think now what has happened is because of the centralization of discourse, through the governments, government propaganda, corporate propaganda through phones, through television, it's become very easy for untruth to be peddled on a mass industrial scale. So, as a result of that, what happens is um, um, some people end up abandoning their ancestral traditions and customs, either because they believe a certain untruth, or they know, but or they feel abandoned. They feel that they have nowhere else to go. They need help, so they convert to, as you put it, to other religions. But they may stay culturally still respectful and so on. And then you may also have other people who um, extrapolate something bad that might have happened to them in their families or in their immediate circle to their ancestral religion as a whole. And I think this is the biggest challenge with Hinduism is the fact that there is neither central organization, there's no central institution, and in a way, there's no central responsibility, you know.
Sure.
And but then, and I think one of the things that's happened, and I might as well be candid about this. Um, Considering India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, went to see Swami and took his blessings. And I remember in 2014, after he was elected, he went to Kashi. And the hoarding he was standing under when he did his first Ganga Harti as the elected Prime Minister had Swami's picture.
Exactly. Yeah.
I take the liberty, as at Swami's feet to say, um, while experts opine that his government, his historic 3 terms, have accomplished many good things for India in terms of services to the poor and things like that. There were 2 or 3 areas on which, the indifference to truth has been appalling.
Hmm.
At the biggest level, indifference to the truth of environmental destruction, and the fact that, people just thinking that if you just put roads and buildings, you'll have development. They keep just shouting that word without reflecting on, what's happening to the Himalayas and the forests and trees. That's one part. But more specifically, this is the concerning part. And I want to share with your viewers a quote from a very influential scholar. I mean, I would like to say mentor, but then I never knew him. A writer named Sitaram Goel, whose books I never read when I was in college, because no one ever talked about Sitaram Goel in college. But in the last 10 or 15 years, Sitaram Goel, Ram Swarup, there is a body of work, people who've done very reasonable evidence-based work on Hindu history and what needs to be done for Hindu survival, which is very similar to, say, the work in some ways of work, say, somebody like Vine Deloria, this great Native American scholar. A great book called, everyone should read, is called God is Red. Um, uh, I think what has happened is in the last 10 years, um, the might of the Indian state has, under a democratically elected so-called Hindu nationalist or Hindu-friendly government, the whole might of the Indian state has been pushed into perpetuating a lot of lies about Hindu society, about gods and traditions, what they mean, and things like that. So, uh, and I don't think it's necessarily out of bad intent. Maybe it's ignorance. Maybe it's the sheer arrogance of power that people don't listen and learn anymore once they're in power, or the way
Ex-
they see they'll just do what they want to win elections. So what has happened is, see, in the US, there is a battle for reality. Whether you agree with, the Democrats or the Republicans or Ramaswamy or Trump or whoever, it's very complex. Right now, there's more diversity of views, frankly, and voices um,
mhm.
on the Trump side. I mean,
True.
I particularly would not have paid attention to him, but the fact that I used to be very, very uh, hopeful about Tulsi Gabbard, who's a
Hmm.
Democratic congressman from Hawaii, anti-war, and all these things. And so, I've been following the discourse on both sides. And what I find in the US is, whether you agree or not, you see certain positions being argued.
Yeah.
We have some positions which are very, very harmful, I think, and extreme, like, say, the Steve Bannon guy and, core MAGA people. They're all out there. But then you also have people like Tulsi, who's really an anti-war Democrat, who never left the Democrats have changed. I don't think she changed. So
Yeah,
anyway, but all these people are putting forth what they believe to be true. And in India, unfortunately, what has happened now is that you know, um, the and it's like the ending of the George Orwell novel Animal Farm, right? When the animals overthrow the human oppressors, they
yeah,
become tyrants. And finally, in the end, the new ruling class, which is some of the animals, and the old ruling class, they sit at the table and they're just doing the same old stuff as before. So I think that is the real danger or concern in India, politically, that you can't keep you can't bring about change if you just keep accepting falsehoods. And I mean, if I don't know if I'm being too vague, but what I mean by falsehood is this whole story that Hinduism is like 3,500 years of colonialism and apartheid brought by these European Aryan invaders who came and colonized, the Dravidians and established this four-tier caste system with the Brahmins on top, and they're just doing everything horrible to this day. So it's very simple. I mean, common sense questions. Um, which is the richest, most powerful community in India? I mean, what is Modi's caste? A lot of people just assume, oh, he's a Brahmin. He's a Hindu fundamentalist. He's a conservative, so he must be a Brahmin. He's not. Most chief ministers in India, most of the wealthiest people, most of the film stars are not from the so-called Brahmin caste. Uh,
exactly.
so I think one of the questions that needs to be asked is, was are we talking about economic and political privilege, or are we talking about something else? And a lot of new research has shown us that the reason, sort of the one of the most austere classes, the teachers, essentially the teachers and the people who do the pujas, the ritualists. I won't say
Yeah,
priests because that's in English. The ritualists and traditional teachers who have a code of simplicity. Um, Most of them, I think, did not have wealth throughout history. A few of them
exactly.
probably, the kings gave them some patronage, but many of the kings in India were from so-called, lower castes.
Yeah,
And look at the past. We don't have, apart from, say, Fatehpur Sikri or Taj Mahal, how many huge palaces do we see from that time? You see huge temples. You don't see huge
yeah,
palaces.
that's true.
And I wrote a piece. So actually, January 2020, well, soon after we had our last talk, a few days after that, I went on the road in Andhra Pradesh. And we went to a lot of amazing ancient temples. And one of the places, and actually, we were there January 22, I think, the day of the Ayodhya Ram Mandir inauguration. And one of the things that struck me when I was traveling through all these villages in AP is that there's a lot of statues you see now, big, big statues, okay, of Dr. Ambedkar, of N.T. Ramarao, of Rajshekar Reddy, Dr. Rajshekar Reddy. And then you realize, and then suddenly, in fact, the day we went into Vijayawada was the day they uh, inaugurated this huge statue of Dr. Ambedkar.
Hmm.
And I suddenly realized this is very fascinating because you have these political parties, like the DMK in Tamil Nadu and so on, where you have two, three generations, accumulating massive wealth and political power, one generation after another. Uh, it's like monarchy in a sense. Okay, democracy. You have an election, you get elected, but you have a monarchy, and you have a lot of wealth and power. But their entire premise, their entire argument is they are saving India from thousands of years of wealth accumulation of Brahmins. I mean, that man called Sanatana Dharma a disease like COVID, right?
I know. I know. I heard about that DMK. That leader was the leader's son was saying that, and it was just truly a horrible thing for especially it created a lot of backlash, and it was really sad to see.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, well, the backlash is mostly verbal. People get upset about it, but you essentially have a situation today that, uh, you know, the- I mean, you see, I mean, maybe I'm becoming more talking more in a social science hat at this moment, But you have a failure of democracy, you have a failure of representation, and I think for everything in the one solution that we all need to think about is truth, and for that we need critical inquiry. We need to just think things through. Say, okay, why is there so much anger against Brahmins, or why is there this demand for more and more reservations, 60-70% of jobs or things being reserved, and things like that. And then you can see that yes, there is some truth that a lot of very poor people you see in India come from the so-called scheduled castes and things like that. But then the people at the top are not what the American textbooks and American professors say, because in the US, see, this is also the problem. They use the word Brahmin like the Boston Brahmin. They just use it to mean, rich or high status, without realizing that breaking the institution of the traditional Brahmin. I mean, I know there are some rich corporate Brahmins or whatever, and a lot of mean, I'm sure there's a lot of snobbish and mean people in every community.
Of
That is
course, yeah,
structurally speaking, if you look at it, the more the thrust of the Indian government's development project, even under Mr. Modi, thinks that it is smashing the institution of traditional Brahminhood, which is, uh, passing on the Vedas, passing on traditional temple worship and customs and traditions, and leaving it alone. That's the thing about a beauty of a polytheistic society. We are not a mass religion, right? India has three mass religions. We have Islam, Christianity, and the secular state, so-called secular state. And Hinduism is just, it's like how it was, like I can go to a Shiva temple one day, I can go to a ISKCON temple the other day, I'll do all these things. And but the two core things for me, like when I was doing my mother's rituals, I remember the priest asking about Swami's big photo. He
yeah,
said, "This is my Adhunika Guru." So he's the guru I had the blessing of uh, seeing in real life in this lifetime at
exactly.
Kurukshetra. And then, but they were from the Dvaita, Madhva, Udupi Madhva tradition, the much more
Mhm.
orthodox. And said, that's fine, we'll do both. You know, we'll follow because my parents believed in that sampradaya. We will respect that sampradaya.
Of
I
course,
have friends who are very, very strict followers of older sampradayas. We should respect that,
of
and
course.
we have much to learn because they know the Vedas. I mean, they know the stuff in Sanskrit. Because you know, like these days, a lot of people will say, "Oh, have you read the Vedas? It's full of regressive stuff." I said, It's like saying, "Hey, have you read Stairway to Heaven?" Or have you read Bolero, which is even more absurd. And I mean, these are things you listen to, right? So the
Yeah,
Vedam is like a chant, like Vedam, Rudram. You go to Puttaparthi, you sit there, you
yes,
suddenly realize, man, this is it. It's not what you read on a PDF or a
exactly.
translation. So anyway, everything seems to be coming back to this idea that we need to revive truth, and to do that, we need to just pay attention, not react, not have this urge to always one up each other on WhatsApp or Facebook. Just be a student within.
That's true. And one part I observed, especially in the last, I would say, year or two. Usually, like when it came to Hinduism, nowadays, like even in the media sense, there's becoming clashes between Shaivites and Vaishnavites, and certain heads of the Vaishnavites are saying things like, oh, the Shaivite gods are not essentially, you shouldn't really focus on them and worship them, and then really the devotees of the Vaishnavites are taking it out of context, and they're just spreading hatred towards the other, you know, deities, and then these people clash with that, and on reality, it's just it's really sad to see that happening within the wing of Hinduism, because we believe that like especially Swami, he said. He essentially was the unity of all religions, and especially within Hinduism, it's like one god but many different forms. It's like an aspect.
Hmm.
And of course, we also believe that Lord, because like even when we look at the avatars of essentially when we look at the avatars, like Lord Rama would pray to Lord Shiva, and then especially
Exactly.
Rameshwaram, and vice versa, because Lord Hanuman himself is the incarnation of Lord Shiva. And then even when we look at the Vishnu Sahasranamam, the first sloka Shuklam Bharadaram Vishnum, which is the son of Lord Shiva.
Hmm.
So, and it's just shocking to see like how people would fight over things while Lord Shiva's the aspects of gods and Lord Shiva is actually inculcated in Lord Vishnu's, and then even like Lord Vishnu's like the Vaishnava uh, principles or prayers is also incorporated into Lord Shiva. So it's just it's sad to see like these fights that were really popular like maybe like 500, 600 years ago, it's coming back now mainly because of media and people taking it out of context without truly understanding the full situation, and they're just being brainwashed. It's just a really sad state to see.
No, very pertinent point. This I was speaking about this with my wife the last couple of days, um, who I guess I could say she's Shaivite and I'm Vaishnavite. But here's a funny thing. Here's a funny thing. I just discovered again from one of my uber trad friends, who's a very Sampradayak, Dvaita practitioner and scholar. Dvaita is, Madhvacharya. He was saying, what is this Shaivite, Vaishnavite thing? Actually, and I wanted to offer a slight tweak on what you said about what it might have been like 500 years ago. This whole story about Shaivite, Vaishnavites sort of being the equivalent of Shia Sunnis or Protestant Catholics is again a colonial projection, which many of us have, because of the power of media and education, have not really stopped in question. I don't think there was anything remotely comparable to sectarian fights in the West within India. And
Yeah.
and because you've just revealed the answer to that yourself. Every god tradition is entwined in the other, right? And Madhvacharya had so many very, very respectful commentaries to Lord Shiva as the god of the mind. Now, the cover of my book, Rearming Hinduism, has the Hampi Narasimha Swami, again,
Yeah.
an avatar of Vishnu. But the poem I quote, I used to sign to all the people who asked for my signature was Mamadehi Karavalambam, give us the shelter of your hands. And that line is not by a Vaishnavite guru, it is by the dawn of Shaivism, Adi Shankara. So you have
Yes.
Adi Shankara writing about goddess Lakshmi, Mother Lakshmi, and Narasimha Swami, and vice versa. So, and by the way, a great contemporary book I want to mention. Earlier, I've talked about Ram Swarup and Sita Ram Goel, being important scholars. There's a book called Names of Gods,
Mm-hmm.
Names of Gods by Ram Swarup. Very fascinating book, and where he unpacks through Sanskrit etymology and also through, I guess, the linguist theories, Sanskrit theories of linguistics, what these mantras and names allude to. And so again, I have an article coming out this week. On this other thing I want to mention, maybe we can come back at the end, this TV show called Adolescence. Speaking of negative stuff in the media, one
Mm-hmm.
was H1B hate, which we talked about. The other was adolescence. But anyway, uh, I think the mantra for us, modern maxim, really is truth over tribes.
Mm-hmm.
Or that, and this is what has happened in the US now. Everything is tribalism. So your social media feed will always only show you, NPR, CNN, whatever, Politico, one channel, and if you're watching Fox News, it'll show you another channel. And then a lot of us can't handle the complexity of so much information. So I think these phones have made us much more tribalistic. And unfortunately, now that is also happening to us because I saw the last 2, 3 days on Twitter, there is this Vaishnavite, Shaivite thing flaring up. And the first thing my wife and I were thinking is, you know, that movie, there was a Kamal Hassan movie, which,
Yes, that's Avataram.
right, right. So
That first
I
scene.
mean, imagine you see a scene like that. It's so dramatic, right? You have a king
Yeah.
who ties the Vaishnava. No, I guess he's Shaivite, so he throws the Vishnu idol with the priest to the bottom. I mean, that's the thing. Once they film something, that cinema is such a powerful medium, and that is why so many lies are being, normalized now. Like lies about, Ravana being a good guy, for example, despite the fact that he kidnapped and harassed this woman. Uh,
Exactly.
Ravana is supposed to be the oppressed guy now, and Ram is the patriarch. You know, uh, And then similarly, in these movies, they're making up all these stories I'm told about how the Brahmins in Kerala were forced the women, not to cover their upper, they put a tax on the upper cloth. A lot of people say that's not true. Now, another similar thing, so many things. So movies are just manufacturing all these old colonial divide and rule tropes, and if you go into the history of these tropes, really, you can see, if you look at S.N. Bal Gangadhara's work or Vishwa Adluri's work, you see,
Hmm.
a lot of these are anti-Semitic tropes. These are tropes early Christians 2000 years ago were using. Happy Easter, everybody.
Yeah.
to, you know, to fight their ancestral religions or traditions there, which are the Jews and the Roman pagans.
Yes.
And they managed to conquer and erase everything else, and they had their own conflicts. They had the Orthodox Catholic, then the Catholic Protestant, and then a million Protestants, then Enlightenment, then atheist Protestant, atheist woke versus the rest. So they keep fighting and fighting. There's a great Ram Swarup quote, sorry. He says, and this is a core issue I think also worth thinking about today. The problem with monotheism is they say one God. There's only one God for everyone. But then they're always dividing humanity into two humanities, two tribes. They're believers and unbelievers,
Yeah.
Christians and heathens, Muslims and kafirs. So, and now, of course, it's like your liberals and, fascists, whatever. They're all the time doing it.
Yeah.
you know and whereas with polytheism you have many gods. You have Ganesha, Shiva. Hanuman can be Vishnu's devotee in the form of Rama, but he's a Shiva's Amsa. I mean, so many things. You have so many gods, but you have one humanity. So, polytheists never killed each other, I think, over religion. I think that is also an important point Goel and Swarup make. So this
Yeah.
Shaivite Vaishnavite thing about, Shaivite kings, throwing idols into the sea with Kamal Hassan tied to them, or the story about, the 40,000 Jain monks being put up on a spear by a Hindu king. Most of these things, historians have been talking about it, they're not true. But unfortunately, establishment historians, so-called peer review mafia, the media mafia, they just lie through their teeth. I mean, one of the things I've been looking the last 30, 40 years is news coverage of uh, two or three important recent events in India, like the 92 demolition of the Babri Masjid,
Hmm.
the 2002 Gujarat riots when the train was set on fire by a mob. And these details, some details are never mentioned.
Yeah.
Article after article, they'll say the train caught fire on its own, even though the investigation, found it was an act of arson, terrorism. They'll never mention that. So, we are living in a time when most of the people around us simply don't have access to the facts and don't have time or the desire or the training to seek the truth, and we take comfort in these tribal tropes. Uh, so anyway, no, I know we've been going on for a while, but thank you for raising that question. I think, yeah, my house, by the way, is full of pictures of Shiva and Vishnu and Swami,
Hmm.
uh, and it's I think let me show you one beautiful picture.
Sure.
My mother's old Chandamama collection. Oops, I don't know.
I can see it partially. It's
Yeah.
I guess the background is.
So Ganesha and Hanuman.
Yes.
So I mean, just we adore all our gods. They exist as gods and not as myths or academic projections. Only as long as they're within that auchityam. The auchityam is the appropriateness.
Hmm.
So anyway, so I think the gods are all fine. Uh, the
Yeah.
god,
Of course.
the divine within has to be revived, and for that, we need more conversations like this. In a spirit of friendship and inquiry, and where we can just say, hey, a lot of this stuff that is being. Oh yeah, sorry. The last lie I wanted to mention. One more thing, speaking of how brazenly people are concocting lies, a few months ago, there was a activist scholar, a professor of Dalit history, who suddenly just announced that he had invented a character about 100 years ago, a Muslim school teacher who was a friend of Dalit icon about whom a movie is being made, and then he just said, "Look, I just invented it." That Muslim school teacher, because now in the West and there is this idea called that Dalits and Muslims are the two oppressed groups of India, oppressed by Brahmins. So they invented this. He confessed. He said he just said just for fun. That's the power of propaganda. I just said there used to be a Muslim school teacher who worked with the Dalit school teacher to bring about social change. And I just made it up.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, people are making up a lot of things, um, and the sad part is they're doing this in the name of fighting oppression and fighting fake news and disinformation. So a lot of people are getting fooled. So I think we have to really, really, look at the last 30, 40 years of what's happened to our discourse, to our belief system, and do what we can. Because next 20, 30 years, unless it's some big changes, these cliffs may not be there, in 20, I don't even know if they're still there. In another 20, 30 years, they may build a big parking garage or a shopping complex in front of it.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, because, that's how things are going.
That's very true. And then, like, this is actually like, this next question, we're going to be shifting on to, of course, the spiritual life, which we've been speaking about, but this one will be kind of more centered around Swami. So, in what ways has Bhagavan Sri Satyasai Baba influenced you in your life?
Oh man, I'll start in a slightly irreverent tone. In
Hmm.
1986, my uh, father decided Baba was God. We were not originally Baba devotees, but he started going regularly as a part of the academic council or academic committees there, helping with the setting up of the university. And my mom went, she put on her play there, and she said, "He's God." Both of them are saying they're God. I'm 18 years old, and I'm confused. I don't know what to make of all of this. And I remember one of my first um, unusual. I mean, I heard my father's stories, my mother's stories, but I found this interview with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, who had
Hmm.
apparently visited Puttaparthi in the 60s or 70s. And they say something very interesting. They didn't become devotees or something, but they were not disrespectful either. They just said, in the West, the pop star becomes a guru, and in India, the guru is the pop star.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I know it's an unusual angle which popped into my head in response to your question. But in a way, maybe Swami has been is mother, father, guru within. Uh, in the Aarti, that song, I remember the first morning in Puttaparthi, as you enter the place, it's so beautiful and tranquil. And the huge trees, the leaves, the birds are singing, and then the Nagar Sankirtana comes along. And the first time I heard the Aarti song, and that
Yeah.
line, Mata Pita Mariantiyu Nive Swami. I said, man, I'm in some place I did not imagine possible. And a couple of hours after that was when I had my first darshan, my first interview. I think he just took me in that day, December 31st, 1986. And I may not remember it always, but he hasn't. I don't think he has dropped me, he has not dropped you, he has not dropped any of us. And this whole circus is unfolding. So what has been my core learning? I think I would say um, he's put me in this unusual path. You know, I read recently that we when we are born, actually we choose our parents because I think one of the big intellectual challenges again is we all acquired this rational idea that it's all YOLO, right? You only live once.
Yeah.
And I think that is a idea that needs to be critically rethought because we often think that hey, our ancestors believed in reincarnation, which means there's a little dot of light in us which pops from body to body, and something like that. I mean, that's I think, a crude way of thinking of it. And because that seems so crude and implausible, we just think, oh, that can't be true. So maybe it's just one body, like, created by a biological fact, like that of any other animal. And then, you have a body, and then you exist for a few decades or years or whatever. And then that's that. But I mean, if you really think through the idea of Atma and Paramatma and all of these things, whatever ways you can, I mean, we are inheritors, of our ancestral biological forces or presence or whatever, right? Every year, like when I do the puja for my mother and father,
Yeah.
three rice balls, three generations. And, and then, so this is all, I mean, I think the realities that were being supported or understood or engaged with in our traditions and practices, which in 2, 3 generations we just said, oh, it's a superstition here or whatever, and we put it aside. I think we need to really start imagining these things more creatively. And I think Swami put me in a very interesting position because, I mean, I got born to a movie star,
Yeah.
which was pretty unusual. But then a movie star who was a Swami devotee, who played the role of goddesses, who was very, very devout, and a very, very kind and gentle father, who was also very creative and whimsical and very, very loving and gentle man, a model side devotee. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. I recently found a letter my father wrote to Swami about a year
Oh,
before.
really?
Yeah, it was just lying in his papers. It was so staggeringly humble and beautiful. Just, he was just pouring his heart out in devotion, saying, like, I mean, what did you see in me? Why do you always say that I'm a good person, I'm a good devotee? Swami, I thought I understood how omniscient and powerful and divine you are, but every day, I mean, I'm seeing it more and more. So I don't know what all my father intuited before he left his form in the last few months. Um, but that is the comforting thing is, you know, even when we get older and we have to deal with the loss of elders moving on, after a while, you realize, reincarnation and all these things, in a way, it's all still here. We're all together. Swami knew us before we were born. Swami will know us wherever we are. He knows us in all these other quantum realities, whatever. So, you know, he's moving everything along, and we should just remember that, I think.
That's true because I've seen many people they get carried away with oh, when will Prema Sai comes, and then especially like we have the teachings of what Swami has left us. He
Hmm.
essentially provided us with all the teachings of how to live our life in a proper way. And then there are thousands of discourses. There's luckily we're able to see his because of media. This is one great thing about media is that we're able to see his his face and his expressions, and
Hmm.
we're able to live with his physical form through the digital version and then see his photos, which I feel is a great blessing. And if we're able to implement Swami's teachings in our daily lives, then that itself will do a great service to, it's not to Swami, but to our own selves. And then when it comes to, when will Premasai comes, I mean, he'll come when he'll come, but, we shouldn't think too much about it. We just need to focus on the current moment and live as a human being that, Swami, the, laid out the plan for it to be. So, yeah, that's one thing I feel. And then, it's, and the part that shocks me the most is especially, Swami, like the part that's wonderful is that, within India, like, he spread all throughout India as well as across the world. Like,
Hmm.
there are devotees from almost every country throughout the world. And then even like, within India, like everywhere. And then especially, I observed like, especially he has a lot of devotees from the states of Tamil Nadu. And then even in Karnataka, there's a huge influence in Bangalore, like, the Whitefield Hospital, the Vrindavan Ashram. So, but then like when it comes to the Telugu people, there's I guess less awareness of Swami. Like, the thing is, we feel so proud. He was like, he was born like, as a in the Telugu, like that's within Andhra Pradesh. But unfortunately, one part that makes me feel sad sometimes is a lot of the people from Andhra Pradesh and of Telugu background. They don't realize the value of Swami and the amount of impact he has had on the lives of people of all walks of faith and all walks of life. So yeah, that's the one part. I feel like hope, like luckily, since the media is there, I feel one way that we can also spread it is like is his teachings. I feel will definitely live on forever. And I that's I mean, yeah, sorry, I just went on a ramble about certain things, but yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. No, in fact, the quick thing I want to mention is I have a friend, a Sai brother, Vinayak, who's written a wonderful screenplay about Swami. And, he's been trying to make this movie. It almost went into production a couple of times and it didn't happen. So it's got a very creative and brilliant idea, but he and I have been bickering like brothers because right now he has the movie kind of conceptualized in Hindi and English. And I've been arguing with him that, it needs to be in Telugu. I mean, you can have characters speaking whatever languages organically and
Of
keep
course, yeah.
subtitles. But I said you can't have Swami primarily speaking in Hindi like a TV serial because, and he's gotten annoyed with me. So anyway, so we are Sai brothers. So only with real Swami strength, the both of us are creative people, so we can get on each other's nerves. So I have really said like, man, I don't even want to see this again if Swami is going to be speaking in Hindi, but I don't know. As I'm sure he has his reasons and his own whim and, or rather, his own vision. But anyway, no, it's interesting that you said this about Telugu. That no, I think see Swami. See again, what I'm seeing more and more is cultural context is very important to spirituality, and the more people start consuming spiritual wisdom in these sort of deracinated or decontextualized forms. I mean, you can read and learn a lot through reading, for example, or through meditation or through certain, modern practices. But the fact is, you know, again, like my Led Zeppelin Stairway to Heaven example, I'll say, actually eating avocado is one thing, and
Mhm.
reading the label on an avocado bottle is another thing, right?
Yeah,
So when you listen to Swami in Telugu, so even if you don't know Telugu, listen to him in Telugu and also just follow along, in the translation. Do both. Because
exactly.
there is a beauty in his Rayalaseema that, to use a sociological term, the peasant Telugu.
Yeah,
I mean, it is so warm, motherly, friendly, so, I mean, you just keep learning more and more with him. Every clip that appears on Instagram or something, I know my finger will get tempted and I'll go watch some other silly meme or some political thing. But when Swami shows up, I say, okay, this is serious. Let me just take this like a vitamin. Listen to what he says. And, a lot of times what he says is very, very pertinent to whatever you need to know at that point. So anyway, so I agree with you on the little go Telugu thing for Swami spirituality.
exactly. So yeah, and especially this is Swami's 100th birthday celebration is coming up on November 23rd. So this is definitely a very special year in the Sai movement.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So let's hope for the best.
That's true. Yeah. And then moving on to the last question before the rapid fire round.
Mhm.
This is more on advice. And usually I say to the youth, but for this time I'm going to say it actually to all age groups. So, what guidance would you offer to people of all groups on staying rooted in religious, spiritual, and ethical principles despite today's negativity and distractions? And how can people engage with media in a thoughtful and balanced way?
Wonderful. This is a great way to, I think, summarize some of the things that came up organically as we were speaking. I think the need of the hour is truth over tribes. And remember, this technology, whether it's phones or TV or radio or newspapers, um, is not designed. increasingly to spread truth or help you get to truth. It is designed to create tribalism, to carve you into markets, into audiences, into targets for propaganda and psyops, into making you believe that something that never was is there and denying something beautiful that is still here. So, truth over tribes. And one way to do that, I think, is um, by retaking our attention and our memory, and by thinking about the past more and more. That's why I love talking about my childhood, not because, I mean, I am nostalgic and uh, it fuels my writing and my energy. But I think um, we should spend a lot of time talking with our children about our parents and about our childhood. And, of late, our Balvihar parents have been asking me to speak to the children at the assembly, and these talks are going very well, because I realize what's happening is I'm giving parents the kind of ideas and questions and cues so they can have more conversations with their children, which otherwise don't occur to them. Because for a lot of parents it's like a cubicalized life flow. It's like 5 days a week you're in the office, you drop kids in school, you go to office, you come back, you make sure you do their homework. Sunday an hour of bal vikas or bal vihar, some sports tuitions, boom boom boom, college, Ivy League. That's it. And so, the more spirituality becomes like a small boxed off part of your life, the more it loses its organic, natural flow and flavor. So, yeah, I'm glad you said not just youth, really, people like in their 30s or 40s or 50s or parents. Um, the greatest gift you can give your children is not just education, but it's memory. It's your stories about your past, your children, tell them the stories your parents told them, because your children need to think of your their grandparents uh, as heroic figures, as because someday when they're in college and somebody says, oh, your grandparents were oppressors and fascists, they'll have the courage and conviction and clarity to say, excuse me, professor, but I think you're wrong. You're just quoting an outdated, colonial book here. I remember my grandparents, and this is what they did, X, Y, Z, or whatever. I'm just giving one small, practical takeaway. But I think what people really should be doing is living in what I call the vertical. I think modern society conditions us to think in horizontal terms. Like, it makes us think, oh, we are part of this group. We are part of a group of, fellow Americans or fellow Indians or fellow Shaivites or Vaishnavites. Again, tribalism, right? That's how it's been conditioned. And I'll give you a practical takeaway. You know, the modern school system, when we are divided into these age cohorts, uh, that was invented just about 100 years ago, like 1890s, early 1900s. It was done in Prussia, Germany, at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, because the king wanted to break the bonds that these village children, the farmers' kids had, where they would be playing with each other, learning from older brothers and cousins and sisters. So these kids were forced to sit 9 hours a day in uniforms with their hair cut off, not and cut off from people older than them and younger than them. So intergenerational education, factory schooling as it's called. In fact, the school system the whole world follows today is called factory schooling because it was designed to turn people into obedient zombie-like factory workers. And that is what we're carrying through, unfortunately, and we need to break that. So the way we can break it is just by having more exposure to people older than us and younger than us. That is the real diversity we need, not this token diversity where everybody thinks alike, but is the same age and just wears different colored costumes.
Yeah,
So yeah, live across the generations. I think that's the advice I would give.
that's true. Because I observe, like, nowadays, slowly when it comes to like certain companies, they're taking a step towards intergenerational networks and stuff. Of course, it's still in the early stages, but hopefully that's able to be expanded throughout.
Wonderful. Yeah. I think because you need that, right? You need mentoring, you need people older than you to pass on their knowledge. And you should have, and we also need, if you're younger and you are with somebody younger than you, like your child or your cousin's child or some like for my students or whatever, you suddenly realize your fear of mortality goes away in a sense.
Hmm.
It's just organic. There's a great Ghantasala song, right? Mukkoti Devatalu Okkatainaru Chakkani Papanu Ikkaduncharu. We always play that when there's a small baby in the house. And, and then suddenly in that song, there's a line which alludes to the fact that the way elders deal with old age and all these things, there is no mortality because when you have children, grandchildren, you see babies, you say, I don't know who my ancestors were, I don't know who my descendants will be, but for now, the flow of life, the cycle of life goes on. And that is why, again, temples and natural monuments are important because, you know, I went to Yaganti, and who knows, maybe 50 years from now, maybe somebody in my family or somebody uh, goes there and says, who knows? I mean, I may not know it, they may not know it, but the deity knows, right? That generation after generation, people have been coming here. So, no, and I'm so glad companies are also doing this kind of training.
It's wonderful. And yeah, moving on to the rapid fire round. So I got a few questions, and yeah, you can give the answers to however you would like to. So my first rapid fire question is, what is your favorite quote of Swami?
Well, I see love all, serve all the most because it's on the Samadhi, and now when we have Samadhi darshan, that's what we see. But I think what is pertinent to me, I thought of this, I've used it in one of my books, is the line which says, truth has no fear, but untruth shivers at every shadow. Yeah. So, that's the thing about truth, yeah, yeah, truth has, that's it. No need for edit. Yeah, rapid fire. That's all. Truth has no fear. That's it. That's my favorite quote.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Then who is your biggest inspiration?
Oh man, a lot of people. I guess, yeah, my parents, and many of the other elders in my family who brought me up. My mom's old school teacher, who was, because my mother was a working mom. She was very busy. So my mom's old school teacher, uh, was a lady who sort of brought me up when I was a kid. She taught me a lot about Telugu. She used to read, Chandamama and, Potana Bhagavatam, all these things. And then, yeah, I will also, again, I'll go intergenerational on this. I'll also say I think a lot of the youngsters I know today, my son, his cousins and friends, my students, you and everybody across generations. The fact that these conversations are going on, you're curious. I think all of this is very promising. So, I'm inspired by the past and future. I'm dismayed by the present.
That's well said. And then the next question is, what's your favorite recent Indian movie that delivered a meaningful message to society? As you know, we see nowadays a lot of the Indian movies are not really doing that.
Yeah, I've been watching so many movies, but I'm not able to remember uh, offhand. But anyway, this was a movie I screened in my class. Oops, oh sorry. It's yeah. This is because this was re-released recently, right? This is the famous Indian Japanese anime Ramayana, the Legend of Prince Rama.
Oh yeah, I heard that actually got released even before the popular TV series that came of the Ramayana in the
Not
'80s,
quite. I
right?
think, yeah, TV series was 80s. This was, I think, late 90s, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I screened it in my class, and then this I'll mention. This is Krishna or Kans. Um, I'll just do a shameless family plug because my brother-in-law is the director of this movie, Vikram.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
so this movie, the TV series was on TV for a long time, but I think the movie is also really good. Krishna or Kans, Reliance Animation is the production. Oh my God, what did I watch? Well, I just watched the new season of Black Mirror. There was, oh, might as well share that. Okay. Black Mirror is this dystopian show, as you know. One episode was really good. It's called Eulogy. It was very moving. It was very sentimental. It could have been a Indian sentimental movie or a TV show. So yeah, Eulogy in Black Mirror was really nice, uh, very touching. Indian movies. Well, I started watching Chava because everybody's talking about it. the
Hmm.
one about Shivaji's son. Yeah, it's very violent, very graphic. So I think I need to complete it before I make up my mind how it. Yeah,
Makes sense.
yeah, yeah.
And then, what's your favorite travel destination?
Oh, the last 20 years, I would have always said Hampi, very specifically, because I mean, I think of it as sort of motherland and source of uh, the revival and everything. And Hampi is still very special. But last summer, we ended up visiting Kanchipuram and in Tamil Nadu, very close to Chennai. And somehow it felt very, very special. And I would love to go there more often because Kanchipuram it's the Disneyland of Hinduism in a good way.
Yeah,
Not
that's true.
yeah, because I mean there are so many temples, so many gods. It's a amazingly vibrant and lovely place. Yeah, so I think my favorite travel destination is places with temples, nature, and yeah, I'm a finicky traveler, so safe and comfortable hotels. So I wish I could say like Grand Canyon or hiking the Grand Canyon, but that's not.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, especially like Kanchipuram. Yeah, it's especially you're right. Like when you describe it like that, because of course there's the Devi Kanchi.
Right, right.
There's the Devi there, and then of course when it comes to the Adi Shankaracharya, the Kanchi Kamakoti that's popular, and then even for in the cultural aspect for clothing, their saris are popular. So you're right. It's a mix of everything.
Oh, and sorry, one quick thing I should mention for Sai devotees, just for what
Yeah.
another place I ended up uh, being summoned to. I mentioned my Sai brother movie maker friend Vinayak, right? So just before I returned from my sabbatical last year, he came to Pune to show me like some rough scenes from his movie,
Hmm.
and he took me to see Swami's ashram in Hadshi
Oh, Haji.
in Pune, up in the hills. It was
Yeah,
so beautiful. Have
I
you?
think Swami actually visited that place about 1 or 2 years before he left the physical form.
Yeah, yeah. And strangely enough, he came there, and that was around the time things sort of wound down for me in Hyderabad, and then because my brother-in-law was in Pune, we ended up shifting to Pune. And I said, look, this is the thing about Swami. The year we started living in Pune, Pune became our base in India. Was around the time Swami already came and went. He had to spend one day in the Pune hills, and already a sense of sanctuary, shelter has been created for his devotees there.
Yeah,
So it was a very serene and beautiful place, with the Hachi. So hopefully I'll get to visit there more often. So
that's true. Yeah, because Haji, I've never actually heard of that name till I like Swami, like back I was like probably 8 or 9 years old when it was like they were like, oh, Swami went to Mumbai. He now went to a place called Hachi, and then, he made some very interesting trips. 1 or 2 years before he left the physical form. Like, of course, Mumbai, Hachi. He even went to Delhi, and then he went to Shimla.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
those were like the interesting places where he visited. And these were during the times when he wasn't feeling he wasn't able to move that much, and but it was amazing he was able to cover these two places, and especially when you said Hachi, I was like, yeah, that's it's amazing because I've heard it's a very beautiful place and a wonderful
Yeah,
environment.
and I just want to add one more thing actually. Now that the fact that I'm in California, you're in Kansas City, and I want to say something about the Sai satsang or our family spread across the world. It's I think there's something to be said about Sai devotees. I mean, the only place he went abroad ever to was to Uganda, right?
Exactly.
And he just went there and came back. He never came to the US. He never traveled anywhere else. But he has put us all over the world. He's taking care of us. I sometimes think we have some kind of a role to play, perhaps in not just spreading the Sai mission of love all, serve all, and all these things, but also in a global kind of ancestral, indigenous, cultural, spiritual revival. Wherever we are, like a little bit I like to learn. For example, in the Bay Area, like learning a little bit about the Ohlone, the Native American culture here, and because people are still there, and there's a lot of people, even European people, who are sort of Christian or post-Christian. They just want to know more about their ancestors' religions. Because see, I think a lot of people today, when they really think of who they are and what their cultural memory is, you realize, they have a very caricatured idea of what these pagans or heathens were. And in a way, people are, I think, getting more and more curious about the world of the old gods. And we are the only land where the old gods still somehow manage to keep their temples and their traditions aloft. So I think from Greece to, the indigenous people of Australia and America around the world, as I think the Sai community should really be more attuned. So, for example, in the Bay Area, there's a little thing I just realized today. I do, I think of Venkateswara Swami every day, and I say Edu Kondalavada, Venkatramana, and I try to look at some hills, because Bay Area
Yeah,
is,
it's full of hills.
yeah, and things like that. My father used to do such things. He would always show me similarities between one sacred site and another one. You would look
Mhm.
at a map and say, hey, look here, in the Tungabhadra is like this temple is here, and now look here, the Ganga is like this here, this temple is here. So, you know, so I think just taking an interest in nature, taking an interest in, the world of the old gods wherever we are. I think there's some famous mounds, right, in Kansas or Oklahoma, if I'm not mistaken, the Native American mounds. Um,
Oh,
some
I-
ancient sacred site. So whatever it is. So maybe, yeah, maybe when the time comes, you'll get to see some of them as well. So
that's true. Yeah, I guess. Like hopefully, I end up seeing that. That'd be nice.
yeah, so yeah, Lavol Serval is like, I think the all now really needs to be bringing reviving the old gods as well everywhere.
That's true. Well said. And then moving on to the final question. What is one daily habit or practice that keeps you grounded?
uh, Writing helps me a lot. Although the last few months, again, just to uh, end on a note of acknowledging limitations and despair, but all bringing it back to hope. Um, from 2015 to about 2024, I was very frustrated. I was not able to write any books. I have a lot of half-written books, but I was writing my columns regularly, about 4 or 5 columns, and suddenly, about 6 months ago, even that froze, and I was really feeling, frustrated about that, and I was not able to know what's happening. And somehow, again, slowly, I've started to write a bit. It's flowing. I don't know why it stopped, where it goes, but I just feel grateful that I'm able to do this work, which I think Swami has put me here for, which is to, bring together social sciences and, art traditions and pop culture, most importantly.
Yeah,
Yeah. And all these things. So I think I find writing, and sometimes, what I do is I just take, after bath, I just write down a few words also, just because the beauty of physical writing is very, very helpful. And then I chant Gayatri mantra every day. And so I have my own little quirky rituals and mantras. So in terms of a daily practice, I would say, I think after bath, sitting down and uh, you know, doing the Gayatri mantra and Sai Gayatri is kind of what I do regularly. Um, Actually, I just realized I've been sitting here with a bunch of books, um, uh, in terms of inspiration. But let me just mention these really
sure.
quickly. Um, okay, this is
Vijnanavahini.
yeah, Swami's Jnana, which I read when I was doing my PhD. I don't know, maybe I'm the only guy who was reading, Marxist stuff and Jnana Vahini at the same time. So I somehow felt like, while I appreciated the concern for the poor and understanding the dynamics of exploitation, repression, and all these things, I also felt like, violence and homogenization was not the way to go, because it never worked. It didn't work in China, in Russia, in Cambodia, uh,
Yeah,
or in so anyway. So this was an unusual pairing of reading, Western academic literature and Jnana Vahini and Vidya Vahini. Vidya Vahini really. gave me courage to be a teacher.
Hmm.
I did not know I could be a teacher till I think I was started reading Vidyavahini. This is a new book, but uh, it's very fascinating. I was recommending it to, it's called
The
The Four.
four-way path.
Yeah. So these authors are more famous. They wrote a book called Ikigai, and it's this Japanese philosophy of figuring out your purpose, figuring out what you want to do in life and how to do it. I mean, I mentioned writing. So Ikigai is the Japanese idea. It became very popular, like in the self-help, in the motivation circles. And this four-way path is very interesting because they are building on the Ikigai idea to and connecting it to the Purusharthas.
Oh,
So Artha, Kama, Dharma, Moksha. And it has a preface by Shashi Tarur. Very nicely put. So the idea, I think, basically is, your daily practice, whether it's spiritual or professional. I mean, I think ultimately we want to have love all, serve all in everything we do, uh,
yeah,
right? I mean, whatever our work is. So their idea of that is dharma is what is you should do to help society. Artha is what you do to make a living, and so that you can nourish yourself. Kama is what you love to do, and moksha is just who you are.
exactly.
So I think this is a book I would highly recommend to your listeners. Might be helpful.
For sure. You know, that was truly wonderful. And then, yeah, with that, like, it was, on behalf of all the viewers and myself, I would like to thank you so much, Dr. Vamsee Juluri, for joining us on the fifth episode of Sci Talks. And it was wonderful listening to all your experiences again, and listening to all the different views you had, and how media is we've covered kind of like the negatives of media, and then as well as some of the positives which media has done as well for humanity. And in the future, I hope that media improves, and that it essentially, it's not media improving, it's that humans have to improve to make media useful. So hopefully we're able to take steps towards that going forward. So with that, I'd really like to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Wonderful conversation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Right on.
Sairam.